Alright, these are the brackets, or a bracket, two of them failed in a row, that hold the fan clutch on for my truck. So basically, you know, the radiator fan goes on here, this index is on there, like so, and then there's also a pulley, just a plain pulley, that's the tensioner, just a pulley that sits on here that the belt rides on to spin the fan. And causes the thing to go, or, you know, spin. Or, well, spins the clutch, which spins the fan depending on temperature, yada, yada, yada. Foreshadowing. So what happened here in both these cases is you can see that the shafts are kind of peened over on the edge, which kind of indicates, and this one looks like it got hot. That could just be heat treating prior to the failure. And also the bearings just got completely munched. I mean, there's part of the tapered roller bearing. Well, I'm sorry, not tapered roller bearing, just roller bearing. And then there's a ball bearing that rides in this groove. And the only thing that retains it from coming in and out is the ball bearing itself. So, let me see. I got a new one sitting over here. So here's a new bracket. So what you can see here, this just rides here. There's a groove, right? You can see what that part would do. There's a groove that rides in that ball bearing. So this thing failed twice. Twice in, well, I put this was when I installed about 20,000 miles ago. It failed. And then this one failed after I replaced it 200 miles later. So I don't know what's going on. Searched around online. There's not a whole lot of info out there that tells you much of anything useful. There was one guy that mentioned, because I went through and I checked everything, you know, all the pulleys and everything felt fine. I went ahead and replaced the tensioner, which we'll take that apart at some point. But this thing felt new on the truck. I could get it to move just a little bit, but not much at all. I mean, that bearing still kind of has that stiff bearing feel to it. You know, it still feels new. There's no play in it at all. So this thing wasn't wobbling. The tensioner pulley, let me grab that. Or not the tensioner pulley, but the idler pulley, same thing. No play. Still has that new bearing feel to it where it's just a tiny bit stiff. Yeah, nothing. So, one guy on one of the forums mentioned that these guys could be, or that this guy could be the culprit. So this is just a fan, or a fan clutch, and I noticed that around the back side of the seal there, it looks like it's definitely leaking. So my best guess as to what happened is this guy, this little spring, when it heats up, expands and opens valves in here. We're going to take it apart and see how it works. And allows oil to circulate out and increase or decrease the resistance to turn, or of turning of this thing. And maybe what was happening is the oil, because it was leaking, it got low on oil, all the oil would slosh to one spot and cause the thing to weeble wobble back and forth and rip these bearings clean out of the housing. That's about the only thing I can come up with. So what we'll do here is we'll tear it apart and see what happens. So what we got. All right. Not too hard so far. All right. Well, that oil looks like it's seen better days. Little O-ring here. All right, definitely need a copious amount of shop towels. All right, so it would appear that this outer edge is just heat sinking. So there was no oil before I gooped it all over the place. There was no oil in there. So that's just basically heat sinking. And and I guess the fan attaches out here too. So it's just a flange for the fan to attach to, and then it's heat sinking. The innards here. So these would appear to be the valves that everybody, the little bit of research that I did, that people were talking about. So what I think, let's pull this just a little further apart here. Alright, we're probably going to have to come back to this a little later because it's nasty. And I'd like to put it on the lathe and get this piece off, but it's going to sling grease all over the place. Alright, took just a little gentle coaxing with a hammer. But this is the flare or flange or whatever you want to call it. Looked like it was just press fit in, and then you can see it's toothed here, so it's an interference fit, more or less, with this inside, I guess, like clutch plate, I guess you would call it. Now if I can get that off of there. There we go. Alright. So, little piece of wire. Alright, so this piece, interference fit onto here, right? So they always spin together. This piece attached to the fan, right? And we'll heat this up to watch the spring move in here. Sits there. This is the reservoir for the fluid. As this heats up, it would... Not a whole lot to that. Well, let's see which way it goes when it heats up. You can see which way it's going there. So then as it cools back down, it should go the other way. Let's see if we can speed up the cooling down process. Yeah, see it's going back. Shifting back the other way. Very slowly. So that's all that is just a thermostatic spring or valve. A thermostatic valve. So that's going to open, I suppose, or would it close? Suppose it would close as it heats up, meaning that the oil can no longer escape from here, and the oil is going to expand too. So the more oil you got in here, the higher the resistance, causes the fan to spin, which is what you want, I think. This part appears to be forged and then turned after the fact. You can see the lathe marks on there. Not those lathe marks, those are from me. But you can see here the very slight grooving, which would be from turning. This pitting is indicative of a forged part. And I'm fairly certain it is aluminum. It's that high silicon, sand. Aluminum with a lot of sand in it. That's the stuff. Same thing for these other parts. Appears to be the same thing. And this guy is riding on a bearing. So we've got a SMT. It's a brand I recognize. Uh, 6205RH. Made in Japan. Alright, so what it looks like it was doing the sealing here. Yeah, so that was an interference fit all the way through. So there was no seal. So that would mean that the oil was working its way through the bearing, I guess. It's about the only way. Yeah, so there's a seal on the outside here. I don't know if that's built into the bearing or not. But you can see there is an extra seal on the outside there. But anyway, well, I was hoping to find something, some sort of smoking gun evidence that this thing was definitely screwed up, but I just don't really see it. Don't really see it. Anyway, thanks for watching.